I have a list of 7 things that could cause you to avoid wanting to move to Orlando, Florida. Let's go. What's up, everyone? My name is Cameron Hodge, a realtor here in Orlando, Florida. And if you want to learn everything about living, eating, sleeping in Orlando, Florida, then this is the channel for you. Hit like and subscribe so you can be notified every time that we put up a new video. We always have so many people from around the world reaching out to us to help them when moving to Orlando, Florida. And if that's you and you need help, reach out any way you can. Call, text, email. We are always happy to hear from you and always ready to help you when moving to Orlando, Florida. So getting into the video, I want to say that Orlando and Florida really in general is not for everyone. And these 7 things that I have really could cause you to not want to move here. So let's get into it. So the first thing that could cause you to want to avoid living in Orlando is probably one of the most obvious. It's just hurricanes, right? They don't always happen. There aren't always severe, and Central Florida in comparison to where I've been all along the coast is not the worst spot. But it's still something to know. Like it could exist. You know, there eventually, if you live here long enough, you will have to go through a hurricane, and probably multiple times at that. So if that's something that you're just, I don't even want to deal with, then maybe you shouldn't live here, because it's just a way of life, and it's just something that you have to keep on top of mind. Most of the time, yes, the weather's great, it's amazing, but it's something to think about. All right, number 2, and that is flooding. So Florida, naturally, most spots is going to be at sea level or below, right? Like it just is how it is. And even like where we ended up living, that's technically in a flood zone, and it's unfortunate. Do we have to do there? Could we have gone somewhere else? Absolutely. But you know, we understood the risk. I've gone through flooding in my life. I mean, a lot of people I know when they come here, they want a guy, the perfect house that's not going to be in a flood zone, or, you know, look, if a hurricane or storm's bad enough, like you really can't avoid it, especially like there's lakes everywhere. Like I live next to a lake. If you live next to a lake, you can't avoid it. Like the water's going to rise. It's just a way of life. I mean, even growing up in New York, right, in the country, like we weren't really in a place that should have a flood, but we were just, you hit that like 100-year floodplain, and I went through 2 of them within a couple year span in deep water. So like, I don't care where you live, like flooding's everywhere. But for some reason, like people, you know, that could be a reason you don't want to live here, because the storms could be consistent during the hurricane season that you're like, you know what, I don't even want to deal with that risk. I don't want to deal with it. It could be a reason you don't want to live here, right? Not to mention, like during, you know, the rainy season, like you're gonna, you know, during the summer and hurricane season, like you're gonna have rain every day at some point. And most of the time it could be random. Sometimes you can see it coming, but a lot of times it's just random, and it's just a way of life. But if you can't deal with it, probably not for you. And number 3, which is not really a huge one, but it's alligators, right? Alligators. Most of the time, especially if you're living in like downtown, like you're not really going to deal with it. But yes, they exist. Yes, it's Florida. They're here. If you go to a lake, you might see one. I mean, even like, what was it, 10 years ago, like Disney World caught a whole bunch in their lake. Like, look, they're here. But as long as you're smart about what you're doing, you're not letting like it's like me letting my 2-year-old go up to a body of water by itself. Obviously, there's common sense. They're here. Some people are just like, never going to happen. That's how I feel. Let's say Oklahoma, where you have tornadoes. Like that's terrifying. At least hurricanes, I can see them coming in at least a day in advance. Yeah, right. But some people don't like alligators, and it's just a way of life. Obviously, like haven't really experienced this yet, but I have heard that obviously when it's hurricanes and like the winds, they get really heavy. Like there have been situations where alligators, they get misplaced, especially during flooding. Like they'll leave their natural areas because the water rises, they get thrown, they get relocated. Like, so that's something that, yes, it could happen. You know, it's Florida. Get used to it. It's just how it is. But it's something that people could not really want to deal with. Number 4, and that is tourism, right? So if you're like me, I grew up in the country of New York. I was a tourist. Like if I left my town, I was a tourist. I promise you. Like no one came to my town. It's not really where people vacation. So obviously, it's not like it's that terrible, but it is something like especially during the winter, Like there are people that come here on vacation. The beaches might be more crowded. Disney World gets crowded because it's, you know, it's just amazing weather and everyone wants to come here. It's just something you got to live with. Also, depending on your budget, you know, like if you don't know what you're doing, which is why we're happy to have the conversation with you to help. If you choose the wrong area, it could be in a heavy short-term rental market, and you could be living next to a ton of, you know, rentals where people are coming and going a lot. Again, crazy scenario, but yes, like it is something that's here. It's a tourist city. People love it. I mean, if your job or your business or whatever you do revolves around tourism, like fantastic, this is for you. But it's something to keep in mind when you think about moving to Orlando, and it could cause you to maybe want to go elsewhere in the state. Number 5, and that is the humidity. So if you've never lived in the South and you are coming from, man, I'm not even gonna say the East Coast, because even in New York, it would get humid, especially during the summer. But if you're coming from like, especially the West Coast, and humidity is not really something you've ever had to deal with, if you've never gone to the South, it's going to hit you. I mean, when you get here, I look over and there's my wife with amazingly frizzy hair because humidity just hits her. I still love her though. But yes, it's something that it's life. You take a shower, you get out for your day, and when it's like peak of August and you're sweating immediately as soon as you walk out the door. Personally, I don't mind it. I lived in a ton of different places in the South, and coming to Florida, we already knew what we were getting into, and we knew that, well, we're going to have AC in home, the car, work, and even if we're outside playing with the kids, like you can include water, like there's ways to get around it. But for some people, you got to come and visit because they could completely make you not want to live here. So it's something to keep in mind when you think of moving to Orlando. Number 6. And this one can be a killer for anyone. So I have had a ton of people reach out, and they hear about Orlando. They're like, you know what? I love Disney. I love the South. I don't care about anything else that we've discussed so far. And they're like, I am coming. And then it's like, 'cause I can go to the beach every day. I'm like, okay, you can. And it's not like the beach is very far, you know, let's say hour and a half. Let's say, you know, Daytona, you can go to Clearwater and Tampa. The beach is not that far, right? Like, it's not like you're like me growing up in New York. Like, there really wasn't a beach, right? Like, we had to go elsewhere to do that. People don't always realize that Orlando's in the center of the state. Like, it is Central Florida. So you're not going to have a 5-minute drive to the beach. The city's just not located there. Now, mind you, there's a lot of things to love, some things to hate that we've already discussed. But if you're thinking you're going to come here and have the beach life, like, I'm sorry, it's not a beach city. It's not far from beaches, so it's a great location that's central. But if that's something you think you're going to be moving into, it's probably not for you when moving to the state. All right, number 7. And the one thing that, like, I didn't even think about even after living in the South before, but it's something that, like, my wife was obsessed with when we came to move out here, and that is Lovebug season. So twice a year around May and September, there was a bug native to this area, mainly the Gulf Coast, but also obviously here in Orlando. And twice a year, it's mating season for this bug. And you can look it up, search it, just look for lug bugs in Florida, and you will see. So you don't always run into them, really, but they're everywhere. Like, I have had situations where they'll just be like all over the car, and like it's kind of hit and miss. It's not that like it's always like terrible, but man, so my wife, right, like if you're either you or someone you know that it's just terrified of bugs, holy cow. My wife will freak out like during these times of the year because she just doesn't want anything to do with them. So here I am having to get them off the car, whatever she's doing. Like, and if you're scared of bugs, it's the South. They are everywhere. There's always bugs. Like they're big, small, doesn't matter. They're here. But yeah, the love bugs, they come twice a year. They're everywhere. It lasts about 3-4 weeks, and you hate bugs, maybe you just stay inside that time, those 2 months out of the year. But that's something that could really deter you. And it's always funny to me when people just don't know about it, because it's not that big of a deal. But for some, especially those that hate bugs, it can be like the biggest deterrent ever. And they're like, you know what? I think I need to go live in Alaska and just stay in like long, cold winters where bugs just don't exist. So if that's not something you enjoy, think about it, look it up, reach out and give us a call. And like, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. But that's all I have. Those are the 7 things that I found that might cause you to avoid living in Orlando if you can't handle them. Maybe it's not for you. But if you decide that those 7 things don't deter you and you're like, I'm ready to come, or you're just ready to make that plan, reach out to us, call, text, email, whatever you have to do. We are here 24/7 for you. And I will see you in the next video.